The Scottish Fantasy is by Max Bruch. It was written for, actually, it's quite funny. So he's a German composer, romantic composer, writing a Scottish themed piece dedicated to a Spanish virtuoso violinist who is Pablo de Sarasate, if you guys know him. So there's a lot of it. It's a bit of an international piece, and it really is. It's a really beautiful sort of marriage of sort of German romanticism. Bruch, the slight funny thing is Bruch had never actually visited Scotland when he wrote the piece. He only visited about a year after he wrote the piece, so which would have been about in 1881. The piece was written in 1879, 1880. So he visited about a year after. And the reason he found these tunes, so the piece is made up of four sort of old Scottish folk tunes. And in the library in München, he found this book of Scottish tunes and thought, oh, these are very beautiful. And he wanted to write a Scottish fantasy. He wrote this piece, and I really like the way he does it because he really taps into the character of each one. So the first one, so we have a sort of ominous prelude that begins it, and that's not based on any specific folk tune. That's a sort of a lament. It's very tragic in its sound. He actually wrote himself. I've got it here. The opening, if I can invoke an image for you, it's of an old bard contemplating a castle and lamenting the glorious times of old. So it's a very sort of nostalgic and image-driven opening. It's very, very beautiful. And then we move on to like to kind of sort of counteract that sort of ominous feeling. We move into a really sort of homely tune called Through the Wood Laddie, which is just very sort of nostalgic and warm and home-like. It's really beautiful, and he and Bruch sort of weaves in his own lyricism to this tune. And then we move to a more dance-like tune called The Dusty Miller, which is just great fun and very. It's because Scottish music is very dance-based. A lot of it is very dance-based, so he really taps into that, and it's really good. Yeah. And then we move to another sort of more lamenting tune called I'm Doon for Lack of Johnny, which is basically a piece about a woman missing her husband. I'm doon for lack of Johnny. So she's missing the lack of her Johnny, or she's sad because of the. Anyway, it's a funny written title. And then we move finally to Scots Wha Hae. Now, Scots Wha Hae is actually the most famous of the four folk tunes that Bruch takes. It's a well-known tune in really Scottish circles, and the rumor is that it was a song that was played and sung before the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314 by Robert the Bruce to kind of rouse the Scottish troops. And Bannockburn is famously where the Scottish army defeated the English army. So Bruch actually marks it Allegro Guerrero, which means warlike. Yeah, so he's obviously aware of the backstory to it, So that again is like a very, it's warlike, it's powerful, and basically that's probably the hardest one for the solo violin. He basically takes the tune and decorates it in many, many different ways. So my own folk music is something that so I've used that to try and inform the way I'm going to play this piece. I think it's quite important to be aware of the performance traditions of folk music, because I mean we're very aware of performance traditions nowadays, specifically obviously Baroque music and classical music. So I don't see why that should be any different for folk music. It's a great piece, and I'm loving getting to know it.